Sir Walter Raleigh's vision. The year is 1584. Queen Elizabeth I reigns supreme in England, locked in a tense rivalry with Spain. Her adventurous courtier, Sir Walter Raleigh, dreams of establishing an English foothold in the New World, a permanent colony that would serve as a base to attack Spanish treasure fleets and, more importantly, prove that England could establish a lasting empire across the Atlantic. Raleigh secured a royal patent and funded several scouting expeditions to the eastern coast of North America, a territory he named Virginia in honor of the Virgin Queen. The early reports returned brimming with promise: mild climates, fertile soil, and native inhabitants who seemed relatively hospitable. The chosen site was Roanoke Island, nestled just off the coast of present-day North Carolina, protected from the Atlantic by the Outer Banks. In 1585, the first attempt at a permanent military settlement was launched, led by Sir Richard Grenville and governed by Ralph Lane. This initial group of over 100 men quickly alienated the local Secotan and Roanoke tribes through their demands for food and outright theft. Tensions escalated, and when the explorer Sir Francis Drake stopped by in 1586, the entire disillusioned group boarded his ships and abandoned the colony. The failure was a harsh lesson, but Raleigh was undeterred. The city of Raleigh, Virginia, 1587. Raleigh planned his second attempt far more meticulously. This time he would not send soldiers, but families, settlers intent on creating a truly self-sustaining town. This group, known as the Chesapeake colonists, was led by John White, an artist and veteran of the 1585 expedition, who was appointed governor. White was also Raleigh's close friend and an exceptional map-maker who had drawn invaluable illustrations of the indigenous people and natural landscape. In July 1587, 117 men, women, and children arrived at the familiar shores of Roanoke Island, intending only to briefly stop there before moving north to the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay, where the environment was rumored to be superior. However, their pilot, Simon Fernandez, a difficult and arguably treacherous man, refused to take them further north. Stranded on Roanoke, they were forced to re-establish the abandoned 1585 fort. The situation was immediately dire. The hostile relations left over from the Lane colony meant the local tribes were wary or openly hostile. The colonists knew they could not survive the winter without significant resupply. After intense negotiations among the colonists, it was decided that Governor John White must return to England to secure immediate provisions and more settlers. Virginia Dare and the departure. Just weeks after her birth, White reluctantly sailed back to England, promising his daughter and the other settlers he would return within 3 months. He left behind a specific instruction. If the colonists were forced to relocate from Roanoke, they were to carve the name of their new location on a large tree or post. Crucially, if they were in distress, they were to carve a Maltese cross above the name. White arrived in England to find the nation bracing for war. Philip II of Spain had amassed the enormous Spanish Armada, and every available ship, sailor, and ounce of aid was being commandeered for defense. Raleigh's pleas for a quick resupply mission were ignored. White was trapped, watching the crucial weeks and months tick by as the fate of his daughter, granddaughter, and the entire colony hung in the balance. The Silent Settlement, 1590. The conflict with Spain dragged on, and John White was unable to secure a ship until 1590, 3 agonizing years later, not 3 months. When he finally returned to Roanoke in August 1950, the scene that greeted him was one of utter silence and desolation. White and his crew first fired signal guns, hoping for a response. There was none. They found the fortified settlement deserted. The houses were pulled down and encompassed by a palisade of large trees, suggesting an orderly and planned move, not a massacre or a sudden flight. There was no sign of a struggle, no bodies, and no distress signal. The only thing they found was a large message carved into a fence post at the entrance to the fort: Croatoan. Nearby, on a tree, the letters CRO were clearly cut. White immediately understood the message. The colonists had gone to Croatoan Island, now known as Hatteras Island, the home of the relatively friendly Croatoan Native American tribe led by Chief Manteo, who had been an ally of the English. Critically, there was no Maltese cross carved, suggesting the move was not made in immediate distress. White wanted desperately to sail for Croatoan immediately, just 50 miles south, but severe weather and a massive storm forced his ship to turn back to England. John White never again returned to America, nor did he ever discover the fate of his family and the people of his colony. The enduring mystery. The 117 men, women, and children of Roanoke had vanished, leaving only a single enigmatic word. Over the next 2 decades, multiple expeditions funded by Raleigh were sent, but none succeeded in definitively finding the lost settlers. The subsequent theory, which has endured for centuries, is that the colonists, starving and isolated, migrated south to Croatoan Island and assimilated with the Croatoan tribe. Archaeological and DNA evidence somewhat supports this. Oral tradition. Local indigenous Lumbee and Hatteras tribes in North Carolina have long maintained traditions of having ancestors who were white and spoke English. Artifacts. In the 2000s, archaeologists found artifacts on Hatteras Island that suggest an early 17th century English presence, including slate writing tablets and rings, confirming that at least some English people spent time among the Croatoan. The Hog Island Map Clue. A map drawn by John White, known as the La Virginia Pars map, contains 2 small, nearly invisible blue patches. When analyzed with modern technology, one patch concealed the drawing of a small fort or structure, suggesting that White knew of an intended move inland, possibly toward the Chowan River, and kept it secret.
Modern archaeology and the Dare Stone enigma. The mystery of Roanoke refuses to die, and modern archaeology continues to provide tantalizing, albeit inconclusive, clues. One of the most controversial elements of the legend is the so-called Dare Stones. Starting in 1937, a series of 48 inscribed stones were discovered by a tourist named L.E. Hammond in North Carolina. The first and most famous stone claimed to have been written by Eleanor Dare, Virginia Dare's mother, in 1591. The inscription detailed the dire situation of the remaining colonists after John White's failure to return. It spoke of illness, the death of White's husband, Ananias Dare, and the settlers moving inland to a tribe they called the Chewanog after a massive attack that killed most of the men. The stones, which were largely found along the Chowan River, caused a massive sensation. They were hailed as the greatest archaeological discovery in American history, seemingly solving the centuries-old riddle. However, a series of investigative reports in the 1940s by historian Haywood J. Pierce, Jr. revealed the majority of the stones to be an elaborate hoax. The inscriptions were often crude, inconsistent, and ultimately traced back to the original finder, Hammond, and his associates. While the Dare stones were discredited as genuine historical artifacts, the idea that the colonists moved inland and met a violent end among the tribes near the Chowan River remains plausible. Today, genuine archaeological digs focus less on sensational finds and more on scientifically examining sites on Hatteras Island, Croatoan,
and along the inner river systems, patiently trying to uncover material proof of European settlement beyond the tantalizing single word left behind in 1590. The true history of the lost colony remains scattered across the vast American landscape, hidden in the soil and obscured by folklore. The fusion hypothesis and DNA research. In recent decades, the focus of the Roanoke mystery has shifted from searching for a surviving English settlement to exploring the fusion hypothesis, the idea that the colonists did not die out but merged entirely into the local Native American tribes. This theory suggests that the lost colonists are not missing, but simply became the ancestors of modern-day American indigenous people. This theory is supported by several lines of evidence. Physical descriptions. Later English explorers noted that certain indigenous families living near the Chowan River and Croatoan had unusually light eyes, fairer hair, and some knowledge of archaic English words. Archaeology. Site X. Recent excavations near what is believed to be the ancient settlement of the Chewanog tribe, miles inland, have uncovered artifacts suggestive of sustained interaction with Europeans, including fragments of 16th-century English pottery and tools, suggesting a longer stay than just a trading visit. Most significantly, research continues on the DNA project. Scientists are working to compare the genetic markers of the descendants of the specific indigenous groups known to have interacted with the colonists, particularly the Lumbee and Hatteras, with genetic profiles established from historical records of the original Roanoke families. While this research is incredibly complex and faces many historical hurdles, the goal is to find genetic commonality, a final, definitive answer hidden not in the ground, but in the lineage of people who still live in North Carolina today. The mystery of Roanoke is ultimately the story of America's first forced cultural assimilation. The final theory, Spanish intervention. While most theories point towards assimilation or conflict with local Native American tribes, a final, chilling possibility centers on the looming power of Spain, England's great rival. Though the colonists did not leave a Maltese cross, they were fully aware that any foreign interference would constitute a mortal danger. In the late 16th century, Spanish intelligence was highly aware of England's attempt to colonize the coast they considered their own. Spanish ships routinely patrolled the waters off the Carolina coast, looking for English incursions. Historical records indicate that a Spanish expedition led by Captain Vicente Gonzalez may have visited the Roanoke area shortly after the colonists settled in 1587, possibly even sighting the English structures. Though there is no definitive proof of a full-scale Spanish attack, the possibility remains that a well-armed Spanish patrol could have easily overwhelmed the small, isolated English settlement. They would have likely killed the men and possibly taken the women and children captive, either back to a Spanish colony like St. Augustine, Florida, or to a brutal fate in the Caribbean. A swift, decisive Spanish raid would explain the lack of a struggle, the lack of a distress symbol, and the settlers' decision to move further inland towards the Croatoan or Chewanog to escape the dangers of the coast. The Croatoan carving may simply have indicated their last direction of travel, not necessarily their safe haven. Thus, the colony's end may not have been due to famine or native conflict, but an act of international rivalry fought secretly on the shores of the New World. John White's final fate and the legacy of the mystery. After his desperate and unsuccessful search in 1590, John White returned to England, heartbroken and financially ruined. He spent the remainder of his life in Ireland, never raising the necessary funds for another transatlantic voyage. His final historical record is a letter written in 1593 to Richard Hakluyt, the great chronicler of voyages. In this letter, White expresses his profound sorrow and frustration over the fate of his colony, particularly his daughter and granddaughter, but he holds out hope, referencing the Croatoan sign as a clue to be followed. John White's remarkable legacy lies not in the colony he failed to save, but in the visual record he left behind. His detailed watercolor paintings of the Algonquian people, their customs, villages, and the flora and fauna of the region provide the most important European visual insight into 16th century indigenous life in North America. These paintings, faithfully engraved and published in their time, shaped Europe's earliest perceptions of the continent. The ultimate fate of the Roanoke colonists serves as a dark and foundational myth for the United States, the terrifying, chaotic, and often fatal cost of establishing a new identity in a brutal and unfamiliar land. The legacy of Virginia Dare, the first English child born in America, is that she became the first American to vanish, representing the ultimate price paid by those who dared to step into the unknown. The story continues to inspire countless books, films, and expeditions, making the Lost Colony America's original and most profound historical enigma. The enduring cultural impact. The final chapter. The true ending of the Roanoke story is not a historical discovery, but its unyielding power in American culture and identity. For centuries, the tale of the vanished settlers has resonated deeply with American themes of courage, isolation, and the mysterious power of the wilderness. The enigma fuels countless fictional adaptations, from horror stories like the television series American Horror Story Roanoke to young adult novels and even video games. It acts as a powerful cultural vessel, allowing modern Americans to project their fears of the unknown, their fascination with the blend of European and indigenous history, and the persistent desire to solve an ultimate riddle. In the Outer Banks of North Carolina, the story is kept alive through The Lost Colony, an outdoor theatrical production that has run almost continuously since 1937, making it one of the longest-running historical dramas in the United States. This play acknowledges the mystery while celebrating the bravery of the settlers and their enduring symbolism. Ultimately, the lack of a conclusion to the Roanoke narrative is its most powerful feature. It guarantees that the 1,170 souls who stepped onto that island will never be forgotten. They are perpetually suspended in history, forever lost, serving as a constant reminder that the American frontier was a place where civilizations and individuals could simply disappear without a trace. The word Croatoan remains the ultimate, unfinished sentence in American history.